Hi guys, so today we have a 2020 election prediction between Senator Cory Booker from the state of New Jersey and the President Donald Trump, who is from the state of New York and currently resides in Washington, D.C. Of course, Washington, D.C. Not going to go for the president, we're going to fill in the safe states. That includes, in fact, Washington, D.C., which is safe for Cory Booker. So, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, I would all put into the safe Booker column. Illinois, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, his home state of New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, New York, Vermont, and that one electoral vote up in the state of Maine. So, we start off 183 electoral votes for Cory Booker. We're going to dish out the safe states for Mr. President. All these safe states are pretty much in the plain states. They all have quite low electoral votes. That's why you'll see the president start off with kind of a lower electoral vote than his opponent there in Cory Booker's. But let's start off 183 electoral votes for Mr. Booker, 125 for Mr. Trump. So let's go ahead and move into the safe, likely, leaning, and toss-up states. So, starting out in the state of Texas, I see this likely to go towards the president here. This is definitely a state where the president can appeal to voters, not really appeal to voters, but Cory Booker can't appeal to the voters that someone like a Beto O'Rourke could do. Cory Booker, someone from New Jersey, can't really appeal to those rural white voters in the state of Texas. So, next we're going to move on to the state of New Mexico. I see this one likely to go towards Cory Booker. It's beginning to be very insanely difficult to make a case for Mr. President to win in the state of New Jersey, just because it's been trending so heavily Democratic, and it went so heavily Democratic in every single past election, except for, of course, when it used to go Republican, and that's pretty much the only argument for Mr. Trump to win in New Mexico. It's beginning to get very difficult for him to actually win in the state of New Mexico. A state that's leaning to go towards the Democrats, that's the state of Virginia. I don't see it being in the likely column. I think it will be within 5%. Cory Booker, a pretty weak Democratic candidate, with all honesty. I don't think he's a very good candidate for the Democrats to run. If they do run him, well, I'm not going to give away my prediction, but I don't think he'd do as well as someone like a Joe Biden or a Bernie Sanders, or even someone like a Beto O'Rourke or a Richard Ojeda, and he would probably do worse than any of those candidates I just listed. So, Virginia goes into the leaning Democratic column. So, we have a number of states left, 174 electoral votes still up for grabs. So, we're going to kind of start off in this area of the country. We're going to move up into here, up into here, and then finish off with the Rust Belt, which the Rust Belt, I like to conclude with the Rust Belt because it pretty much will decide the 2020 presidential election. It is likely to decide the 2020 presidential election. So first up, we have the state of Arizona. I'm putting this in the leaning Republican column, definitely going to go towards the president. Cory Booker, again, just can't appeal to the Arizona voters. He can't really appeal to the Republican voter base in any way, shape, or form, and he doesn't have as good of an outreach as to the Latino community, and that's what you need to win in Arizona and Texas, or even come close to winning in those two states. So that's Arizona. Next up, we have the state of Nevada. I'm putting this in the leaning Democratic column. I think it might be about the same margin as in 2016, just because, again, Cory Booker can't really appeal to these Latino voters. I think actually he would do even worse than Hillary Clinton did. That's saying something, and I just don't think that, again, Cory Booker cannot appeal to these voters. Now, he can't appeal as well as Hillary Clinton, but then why are you saying that he wins as much as Hillary Clinton? Well, Nevada, again, is trending blue, and that kind of offsets some of that advantage compared to Clinton. So that's it with Nevada. Colorado, I'm actually going to put in the leaning column, and I think it will be on the verge of outside of leaning. It will be kind of 4 or 5% win for Booker, because again, he can't appeal to these Latino voters, and he can't appeal to the Republican bases in both of those states. But again, I'm very torn between putting it in the likely or the leaning column. I could definitely see an argument for it to be in the likely Democratic column for someone like a Mr. Booker, but again, he can't really appeal to those voters. So next we're going to go over into the state of Nebraska. I definitely see this 2nd district going towards the Mr. President. It won't be much of a contest given Cory Booker can't appeal to these kind of voters, so I'm putting that actually in the likely Republican column. Next, we're going to go down to the South. This is an area where Cory Booker probably will struggle in. He's probably going to lose all 3 of these states, and I pretty much just gave away everything. He's probably going to lose all 3 of those southern states. Now, before you scream at me, North Carolina and Georgia, I see them being quite close, because Cory Booker, he is an African American candidate, and I see them being competitive with identity politics, kind of in at this point in time. We can say North Carolina and Georgia probably going to go to Mr. President, but could be quite close given Cory Booker and how he can actually appeal to these African American voters. In addition, we have the state of Florida. That's going to be another hotly contested race, and I see it being very close, but at the end of the day, I believe that Mr. Trump can eke out a win, because I keep bringing this up. In a blue wave, this was that election in 2018, that was a blue wave, pretty much no question about it, except for the Senate. But again, Democrats had a bad map that year in the Senate, and in a blue wave, Republicans still won. That's something to note, right? Florida, I see leaning towards the president. Against a generic Democrat, I see Florida leaning towards the president. So, we've done with the South. Mr. Trump has opened up a narrow lead over Mr. Booker with 235 electoral votes to Mr. Booker's 216. So, next we're going to go over into the districts and up in the state of New Hampshire. I actually see New Hampshire leaning towards the Democrats. Now, I see Mr. Booker's kind of northeastern appeal kind of carrying over a bit up into the state of New Hampshire. It also went for Mrs. Clinton, and that's also something to note. And then in the state of Maine, I see that Maine at large. I can click on it. Sorry about that. I see Maine at large going towards Mr. Booker by about 5 or 6 points. Narrowly going into the likely Democratic column, but that 2nd district I do not see flipping anytime soon against someone like a Cory Booker. The only people I can see it getting competitive for is for a Joe Biden. It's for a and the only person I see actually flipping is for a Bernie Sanders. So now, let's take a look before going into this Midwest area, which is going to decide this presidential election. We have 222 electoral votes for Mr. Booker, 236 for Mr. President Donald Trump. So, within this Midwest area, let's start out in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, Cory Booker, he's from the neighboring state of New Jersey. That plays to his strengths. He can appeal to the African American voters in Philadelphia. That plays to his strengths. But can he appeal to the white working class voters in the state of Pennsylvania? Now, I haven't seen really a poll on this, but my guess is probably not. Cory Booker pretty much is the same as Hillary Clinton to Pennsylvania voters. He's another kind of establishment Democrat, and Pennsylvania Democrats and independents, they don't like that, and they will probably stay home or actually hold their breath and vote for Trump for a 2nd term. And for that reason, I see this one narrowly going towards the President, Donald Trump. So Cory Booker has quite a deficit to make up. He needs to win most of the outstanding states to actually pull off an upset in this presidential election. In the state of Ohio, I see that one going towards the President, Donald Trump. That officially re-elects him as President of the United States of America with 274 electoral votes. So again, same argument with Pennsylvania, but again, this is an even stronger case for the president. In Ohio, in a blue wave year, Republicans, they won the governorship. Democrats, they did win the Senate seat, but by a smaller margin than was expected of them. And Republicans held all of their competitive House seats. So it's definitely a question as to whether Ohio was a swing state. I would argue that it's definitely leaning in a Republican direction, and definitely leaning in a Republican direction against someone like a Mr. Booker. So that's it for the state of Ohio. I see this one going towards the president by about 4 or 5 points. So I could actually see a very strong case for this going into the likely Republican column, but because Barack Obama was able to win here, I'm putting this in the leaning GOP column. So next up we have, sorry, not the state of Iowa, we're going to go over to the state of Michigan. I see this one being extraordinarily close. Michigan, not Iowa. I'll come to Iowa in a sec. But I see Michigan being extremely tight. Too close for comfort for either of the campaigns. They will compete heavily in the state of Michigan. Mr. Trump to build up a bigger lead, and Mr. Booker to close a kind of lead. Right. So Michigan I see being very close. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, I think that these voters will look back on 2016 and they'll think, well, Mr. Trump, he's not my ideal candidate. But I do not want someone like a Mr. Booker, or someone like a Mrs. Clinton, someone like a Mrs. Harris, or someone like a Mr. McAuliffe. I don't want any of those establishment Democrats to win, and I believe they will re-elect Trump in the state of Michigan. Going over to the state of Wisconsin. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to conclude this by saying that it's the exact same as in 2016. This Cory Booker, I think, is one of the worst Democrats the Democrats could run. He consistently would underperform in states like Virginia and Colorado. He would lose the Rust Belt, and he just is probably going to be a bad candidate for the Democrats to run. However, there is a path to a Booker victory. First, he needs to win the close state of Michigan. That's the first step. Second step for Cory Booker. He could win in a southern state. In both of these southern states. Right? That would get him a victory because of his appeal to African American voters. Another way he can win in the Rust Belt. He wins in Pennsylvania and he wins in Wisconsin. Right? Or if he loses Wisconsin, he could win in the state of Maine. That would get an electoral college tie, but given the House of Representatives is currently controlled by the Democratic Party, it would likely go over towards Mr. Booker. But again, it would be better if he wins in Wisconsin, because that would guarantee an electoral college victory, and also because if the Senate would choose the vice president, which could have the really awkward thing of having Cory Booker being the Democrat as the president in the White House, and then having Mike Pence as the VP. That would be pretty awkward for all parties involved there. But we're going to move this back to our prediction, which is the exact same as 2016. So again, reasoning for these Rust Belt calls for the Republicans. Cory Booker, pretty much like Hillary Clinton, he can't appeal to these Rust Belt voters, and I see these staying with the President of the United States. So that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.